You are listening to the prequel, Messages from God in Jesus' name. Messages from God, the Memoirs of Grandmaster Eric Kino from the In Jesus' Name series. Chapter 7, Heaven Received. It seemed by the time I was 27, I had the world by the horns. I was married to the prettiest and sweetest girl on earth. My 9-year-old son was bright and talented, making movies and winning martial arts competitions like a pro. My business was booming, growing, and expanding. Anne and I had droves of wonderful friends, and we entertained both our friends and our family often in our beautiful, spacious home. Again, I don't say this to boast. I am expressing gratitude and encouraging you that you too can find your path and live an amazing life. I'm wanting to share my joy with you by helping you to find joy also. Many of my original students were growing and prospering and spreading their light. Two of those friends were Justin Lee, who is now a brilliant attorney who would soon have his own practice, and his little brother Jason, who was now 15 and a prodigy as far as martial arts and tournaments were concerned. I mention these two friends because they have been with me since the beginning, and from then until now they have never left my side. Friends such as they are precious and valuable. They are the epitome of loyalty. They are also the epitome of strength and power, and it was a good thing for me, for it was they who helped me through the next phase of my life, and I would indeed need their help. Even with everything going our way, Anne had seemed a little down, and I loved her so and wanted her to be happy. I began to wonder if I needed to be more attentive or more loving, or maybe should be a better listener. I tried to talk to her. I tried to understand what was going on in her mind, but she insisted that she was happy and fine. Now, this wasn't the first time we'd had discussions like this. Our entire marriage thus far, I was very careful to not overshadow her. I encouraged her to do things she loved, to maybe go back to school or take some classes. I offered to take dance classes with her, which we did for a while, but she grew bored with it. She kept telling me that she only wanted to be a wife to me and mother to Ricky and be the best she could be. Don't get me wrong, that is a brilliant and difficult undertaking, and I was glad that I could provide her with that opportunity. However, I didn't want her to feel trapped or overburdened or underappreciated. One day, after a long walk on the beach, watching Ricky run ahead, Anne mentioned how she wished he had a sibling to play with. It was the first time she'd ever said anything like that, and my heart leapt. I'd thought many times how much I'd love to have another child, but I never said it to Anne because I knew she'd give that child to me whether she really wanted to or not. Now, she brought it up, and I remember turning and smiling at her with such love, and she smiled back at me, and suddenly we couldn't wait to get back home, have dinner, put Ricky to bed, and begin right away working on that goal. Wouldn't it be wonderful to bring another bundle of love and joy into the world? Wouldn't Ricky be so happy to have a brother or sister? The joy in Anne's eyes dispelled any worries I may have had. We began immediately trying to get pregnant, but it didn't happen. We began to look into natural ways to help fertilization, and it still didn't happen. I went to a doctor to see if I was the problem, but that wasn't it. Finally, Anne, who hated doctors, went in to find if she had a problem. Initially, the doctor said she was fine and we were probably just trying too hard. But then the results from her pap test came back. There was an irregularity, and they wanted to do a biopsy. That was when the dreaded word reached out and grabbed us. Anne had cancer. I won't go into all the details, not only because they are tedious, but because I don't want myself or you to focus on the problem. I have learned a hard lesson. Never focus on the problem. Always focus on the solution. This can go for anyone who has any problem, be it an illness, the loss of a loved one, a legal matter, a bad marriage, or even something as silly as a bad day. And allow me to use the bad day scenario as an example. A friend tells you they've had a heck of a bad day. You feel compelled to help them. You want to commiserate, to let them know that you understand. So you say, "Tell me all about it." One of the worst things you can do is to hear or tell a bad day story over and over. Speaking it only adds energy to the problem, which of course attracts more bad days. You are focusing on what went wrong. You must never commiserate with someone over their bad day story. If you really want to do something to help them to focus on the solution by talking about the solution. Or if there is no solution, focus on anything good or positive about the situation. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't be a good listener when someone needs to be heard, to vent, to explain. It's how you listen that counts. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. This is terrible. I feel so bad for you. I'm mad right along with you. I don't know how you can stand it. What a horrible situation." Those are some of the worst things we can say. Commiseration is not the answer, and it bears saying again, only gives energy to the problem. Instead, focus on the solution. Examples. "Wow, that's quite a story. So what are you going to do to get out of that situation?" Or, "Man, I bet tomorrow will be a much better day." Or, "I understand how you're feeling, and what always helps me is..." Now, all that is good, but when someone is gravely ill, you may feel like there is nothing positive to say, and there may not be, except maybe, "I will keep positive thoughts for you. I will keep you in my prayers. I will send you the healing light of Christ." So I will not go into detail on Anne's cancer. In a nutshell, it was stage 4 uterine cancer that had metastasized, and I admit fear took over immediately. I felt as if our family was falling through the mountain, bumping heads and chins, getting broken and bruised and bloody, and finally landing in a heap deep inside the earth, smothering from lack of air, lack of water, and lack of light. Actually, fear did not take over. I allowed fear to take over. For all my wise lessons to my students, I lost myself. I felt completely unconnected to my God, and I floundered for a time. I floundered much like I did when I was inside that mountain, wishing to be back in my home, wishing that I couldn't stay there and die a long, slow death, begging to be saved. I tried to pray over Anne. I tried to meditate, but my mind would not quiet. Weeks later, one night, I was in such turmoil that I couldn't sleep. I felt as if I would jump out of my skin, and I rose and went out the back door and down to the beach. I looked out to sea and then up to the heavens, and I yelled, "Why won't you hear me? Why won't you help us? Why is this happening, God? What can I do?" When I felt no inkling of an answer, I turned and ran down the beach full speed until I couldn't run anymore. When I stopped, I realized I was miles away from home. I was exhausted, covered with sweat, and I sank down onto the sand, laid flat on my back, and I cried. I suppose the running and the sweating and the crying got it all out. I lay there on the sand, staring up at the night sky, and when I asked the question again, "Please, dear Father, please tell me what I can do," the answer came. There is nothing you can do. My first thought was, I don't buy that. If a doctor had told me that, I would not have accepted it, like Kai's doctors back on Kauai saying she would never walk again. Yet this time, I felt the surety of this in my soul. It was out of my hands, and I was powerless. There are times when you must never give up, and there are times when you must accept that there are some things you cannot control. I accepted what was happening in my life, in our lives, Anne and Ricky and myself. I accepted it like I finally accepted my own death back inside that mountain, though in complete honesty, I admit that in the back of my mind, I still hoped that if I accept, would a miracle occur and suddenly she would be cured? I'm human, and as I've said many times, not perfect, and so that hope still had a tiny glimmer, though in my heart I knew that this time it was not to be the case. As I laid there in the sand on the beach, miles from my home in the middle of the night, tears on my face for the loss our family was about to experience, the Holy Spirit spoke to me. His voice came into my mind quietly. You have talked the talk. Now, Eric, you must walk the walk. I asked, how? How do I walk this walk? How you walk the walk when things seem to be at their worst is the true measure of what you have actually learned, and even more so of what you truly believe. So search your mind and remember. What have you learned? To listen quietly, to let go and not try to control the outcome. Let go and let God, literally. Go with and abide by His will. Accept it and be grateful. And love. Keep love in your heart. I do love, I whispered. I love her, and I can't even think of how I will live without her and how Ricky will live without his mother. Please, please, help her. Do you see how quickly I reverted back? Obviously, I hadn't truly accepted it yet, and my Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit, spoke again. Let go, Eric. Think back to what you learned when your son was born. Quiet your mind and let it come. Quiet my mind. Back to the basics. When things get tough and out of hand, that's always the best action. Go back to the basics. What are the basics? Prayer, meditate, breathe, be quiet, listen. And so I did. It took a while, and when I finally quieted and let go and accepted, I felt a calmness come over me. I felt a vibration move through me, and suddenly I knew. I knew it all. This is what I remembered, for remembering is the only way I can explain what I suddenly knew. What did I learn when Ricky was born? I learned that we'd been together before we ever chose to incarnate on this earth. I learned that there had been a plan. Sometimes the plan is more intricate, and sometimes it is more general, such as go to earth, live, learn, gain experience in a certain situation. There is a plan. The remembering flowed into my conscious mind. When we are born into this earthly life, there is an evolution that occurs. Some beings are more evolved than others. Some choose certain paths during their incarnation to be in service to others. As inconceivable as it may seem, they may choose before they ever come to earth that they will leave quickly by contracting a disease or having an accident. Why? Why would anyone do this? As I said, from a human perspective, it seems inconceivable. Yet, suddenly I could feel their perspective as an eternal being, and I understood. A person who chooses to do this does it in service, to help those around them during their earthly life, to grow, to evolve, to handle the tragedy of it all, to search and find peace, to learn to let go and trust God. We don't always learn it right away. We may have many experiences to learn how to handle tragedy, but we do eventually learn. We learn to love and to forgive, to do away with bitterness. This is how we grow and evolve. Still, not all accidents or all diseases are part of a plan. Sometimes another's choice interferes in our plan. Sometimes we bring it on ourselves in one way or another, or perhaps sometimes the plan changes. Everything is adaptable. Sometimes there may be a miracle cure, and sometimes there is not. We may cry to God, why? Why would he save one and let another die? It's all about free will and the plan you chose. Yet, there is a constant in every single instance, and that constant is that each time is an opportunity to grow and evolve. It's difficult for someone to accept that the death of a loved one could ever be a good or positive thing. That is still thinking from a human perspective. If you don't have some kind of inkling of how eternal our beings are, then the loss of a loved one is devastating and would make us inconsolable. This concept is covered brilliantly in a Christian song by Big Daddy Weave called Heaven Changes Everything. Indeed, it does. To know there is definitely something beyond this earth life changes everything. Even with that knowledge, though, losing someone is still difficult. For example, many people of faith in various religions teach about our eternal souls, so they have at least an inkling or they have faith that we are eternal. Yet when a loved one leaves them, their faith is sorely tested, and understandably so. As I discovered firsthand, it is one thing to talk the talk, and another altogether to walk the walk. I wish that there was a way for me to convince you that we are eternal. However, this is something each person must discover for themselves. I can only tell you this: God is real. Jesus is real. We do have eternal families, and you will continue to interact with those families. I was relieved and blessed to have this knowing come to me. As I sat there on that beach and watched the darkness of night lighten to gray, a feeling of peace came over me. Peace and a challenge. How will I handle what is to come? What can I do to, quote, walk the walk? I pulled myself into a full lotus and I listened again, and at first I heard the same message I just remembered. It was as if God felt it was important that I truly grasp what I remembered, and so I will repeat what I heard in just the way I heard it. What did I learn when Ricky was born? I learned we knew each other before we came to Earth. I learned that we chose to be together on our journey. We chose. Everyone must choose. God's universe is based on free will and love. Free will is a universal law that even God must obey. He does not merely send us to earth to learn lessons. We must choose to come, and we must choose the lessons. And some people come only for ourselves, to learn, progress, and evolve. And some people come only to serve. And some people come to do both. I came to do both. Ricky came to do both. Anne came to serve. It was a jolt. Anne came to serve. Anne's purpose was different than mine. Every single one of us has a different purpose, some only slightly different than our own, some vastly different. Though we may not understand from our lower earthly perspective, there is a purpose to everything. Lives can be cut short for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's the path we chose. We will come to earth, we will live briefly, we will be a catalyst for someone else, and leave. Sometimes the darkness interferes with a life to try to keep them from evolving. Some people simply do not fulfill their plan. Sometimes their plan is interrupted by something or someone else, and sometimes they falter and wander down a wrong path. Sometimes they find their way back. Sometimes they don't. But don't worry, God is just. Trust Him. He knows our hearts. Our purpose is to evolve and to find our God qualities, hone them, and become like Him. They will bring us great joy. It was almost an overload for me. The knowledge was coming so fast, yet it gave me much peace. And finally, I knew what I must do. I must take advantage of each and every moment left with my wife. I must walk the walk. I must teach what I've learned about eternal families and eternal lives. I must live in positivity and be grateful for Anne and for Ricky. And I must teach Ricky about eternal families and help him to understand the loss of his mother. I must widen his perspective. I must tell him every single thing I have learned. I must dedicate myself to teaching all that I have learned, not only to Ricky, but to my students, and now, as I write this book, to anyone who is led to pick up this book and read. The new day dawned. I expressed gratitude for the new knowledge and peace I was experiencing. I must say here that when Jesus gives you peace, it is an amazing feeling. Everything is instantly better. I stood and headed home. When I arrived, Anne was in the kitchen and she smiled at me, and I took her in my arms and told her how much I loved her. She touched my face and said she knew. She told me she'd had a dream and that she wasn't afraid at all of what was to come, that she would not give up on life, but that whatever happened, she would always be grateful to have met Ricky and I. From that day forward, we lived in complete gratitude for each other and for each minute. We helped others to understand and accept our peace with Anne's illness. We tried to set a good example for people who were in a similar position. We visited hospitals and entertained children and spoke softly with their parents. We tried to help them to focus on positive things, tried to help them to connect to God, to Jesus, anything they needed so that they could understand and feel the peace that we'd begun to feel. We didn't do this with ego or in preaching, only out of love and compassion for what they were going through, for we knew that firsthand. We also knew that those who were ready to hear would, and those who weren't would not. No problem. As I've said over and over, each has a path to walk, and just because that path is not the same as mine does not mean that you're going the wrong way. At one of our trips to a children's hospital, we met 6-year-old Eve. Like most of the children, she was sick but not sad. She was a sweet, happy girl. As Anne spoke to her, she realized Eve loved music and whispered to me to run down to the gift shop and see if I could find her a music box. And I came back from my errand successful. Little Eve was delighted with the gift, and she and Anne took turns turning the key and listening to the music. It played the theme song from an old movie, Love Story, sung by Andy Williams, and when Anne told the girl there were actual words to the song, Eve's eyes lit up, and she begged Anne to teach her the song. So we sat there for over an hour as Anne taught the girl to sing the song, one with very grown-up words. Though Anne and Eve were having a grand time, Eve's parents and I were struggling very hard to hold back our tears. In case you've never heard of this song or can't remember, here are the lyrics. I'm sure you can understand how this song touched us as Anne and Eve sang together. Where do I begin to tell the story of how great a love can be? The sweet love story that is older than the sea, the simple truth about the love she brings to me. Where do I start? With her first hello, she gave new meaning to this empty world of mine. There'll never be another love, another time. She came into my life and made the living fine. She fills my heart. She fills my heart with very special things, with angel songs, with wild imaginings. She fills my soul with so much love that anywhere I go, I'm never lonely. With her alone, who could be lonely? I reach for her hand. It's always there. How long does it last? Can love be measured by the hours in a day? I have no answers now, but this much I can say. I know I'll need her till the stars all burn away, and she'll be there. I can still see that day clearly in my mind. I can see Anne and little Eve, their heads together as they sang quietly, learning the song. I was so touched by this that I went back to the little gift shop and looked for another music box for Anne. They didn't have any more that played Love Story, so I bought what they had, which was one that played Beethoven's Für Elise. That day is such a wonderful memory. It doesn't bring sadness or nostalgia. Instead, it brings peace and love. Let me make this clear. I'm not saying that people who are sick should merely give up and allow death to come. What Anne and I chose was rather than live in fear or desperation, we made peace with whatever the outcome would be. Anne and I came up with a plan to fight the cancer, both with the help of her doctors and through the laying on of hands in Jesus' mighty name and natural homeopathic remedies. Anne chose to also go through the doctor's prescribed treatment. I supported her in anything she felt she needed to do. Like I said earlier, I won't go into detail. I will say it began with surgery, it went on to radiation, and finally chemotherapy. And she held on for almost a year and a half. We had Ricky's 11th birthday party at the house on a bright Saturday in May. Anne planned it and had it catered and ordered us around, and we obeyed like good soldiers. She laughed about that, and that was good because Ricky and I truly enjoyed making her laugh. Though it was Ricky's party, everyone seemed to gravitate toward Anne. She sat by the pool on a chaise lounge, looking like a fairy princess entertaining her court. She wore a sun hat with a yellow flower on the brim. She was thin and pale. It was as if everyone knew she was not long for this world, and they wanted to bid her farewell. And a few weeks later, on the 1st of June, in our room, in our bed, in my arms, with the full moon shining on her face through the window, Anne passed away. Chapter 8, The Meaning of Life. I have been asked, what is the meaning of life? Why do we come here? Where do we come from? Where do we go? I try to help people find the answers they need. If I simply told them that we are eternal beings and there's nothing to fear from the transition between earth life to a more eternal perspective, it would not relieve their fear. I want to help them understand. I have a great overpowering need to help them. I empathize with the frustration of not knowing. However, they must do the work and learn some of the things for themselves through their own spiritual connection. After all, I could tell them all that I've seen and all that I've done, and that may help a bit. But if they haven't experienced it for themselves, then what I have to say is only a nice, perhaps inspirational story. If we could or would learn from others' experiences and from others' mistakes, humans would be a highly evolved species by now with complete peace, complete love, and complete joy. It would be nice if we could learn from others' mistakes. It's good to be humble and teachable, and those who are do learn from others' mistakes and experiences. Notwithstanding, unless we experience some things for ourselves, it is almost impossible to assimilate and integrate what we've learned into something practical. Take romantic love, for example. Until we feel it for someone, we really can't explain the feeling. Until we feel it ourselves, we really can't understand it, can't understand why we would do almost anything to have it. Yet once we fall in love, we think, so this is why people say they would go to the ends of the earth for love. Love is grand. More examples. Until we have our own child, sleeping soundly on our chest, cooing softly, there's no way to explain the bond between a parent and a child. Until a woman goes through labor and childbirth, there is no way to make another woman understand. Until that child has experienced a broken arm, how do you make a child understand why he shouldn't climb so high? If you tell him because it's dangerous or you'll get hurt, do you think he will assimilate that information? Learn from others as much as you can, but there is no shame in not being able to learn without experiencing some things for yourselves. It is possible for me to teach you what I have experienced and what I have learned, and that will help you to awaken and give you the motivation to get started. Yet, even more than telling you my stories, I wish to teach you how you can connect spiritually to your eternal families, to your angels, and to God. It is possible. I am not special. I am merely following my path, and part of my plan was to receive instruction from my messenger and then teach others to awaken and connect themselves. Each and every single one of you is capable of connecting with God. Until you do, you will not understand how this connection can heal you from any situation. Depression, gone. Sadness, gone. Loneliness, gone. Traumatic violence, such as rape or domestic abuse or war, etc., healed. Sorrow, healed. Diseases, healed. Loss, accepted. Peace, found. This connection is like a rising up above all the drama of the earth, a knowing that you are not alone, that you do not ever have to be a victim of any of these things again. Connection, alignment with God, gives you a higher perspective where you realize that what we experience here is a drop in the bucket. This is seeing through God's eyes. Once you've connected and found this different perspective, the troubles and burdens we experience lighten and even melt completely away. We realize all the drama we experience is merely small stuff. Does that make you angry? Many get angry when I tell them everything is small stuff. They feel like I just don't understand what they're going through, and how dare I mitigate their problems. I am not making light of them. Your problems are real. They are powerful, and if you allow them to, those problems can and will destroy you. What I am trying to do is let you know that you can heal, you can rise above, and those problems will not affect you anymore. You will find peace and understanding, and you will wake up in the morning and feel only joy. This healing is completely possible, and it's not complicated. It is done through a spiritual connection to Father God and His Son Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter what religion you are. If you are not religious at all, this spiritual connection is merely an opening of your eyes to see things, to feel things that are there that you were oblivious to before. Even scientists have discovered that there is more on our earth, to our earth life, than we can feel with our five senses. The spiritual connection I speak of is not as difficult as you think. You do not have to fast for days, go into deep trances, figure out transcendental meditation, or sit in the lotus position for hours and chant. The thought that you must learn to do these things in order to connect causes stress, and you cannot connect if you are stressed or fearful or disappointed or sour or irritable or impatient or anything negative. Nevertheless, I can teach you this spiritual connection by following a simple plan. It is easy and stress-free, and depending on your own attitude, you will begin to feel like a new person, a different person, in a small amount of time. Each person is different and coming from different belief systems, so each person's connection time will differ. Each person has chosen a different path. Still, not one of you is alone. I will continue telling my story here, and by the time you get to the chapter on spiritual connection, you will understand that it is easy, that it is important what you do in this life, and that it is completely up to you and the mindset you bring to the game. All this being said, do you think that once my sweet wife passed away that I merely shrugged my shoulders and went on without a hitch? Of course not. We were sad. We missed her. We longed to speak with her, to hear her voice, to feel her touch. My son was 11 years old enough to understand what had taken place and young enough to miss and mourn his mother greatly. More than once I faltered. However, I'd been blessed to be privy to things that not many others had experienced, and as I'd been told, it was time for me to walk the walk. I did the best I could, and I was able to do that because of the spiritual connection I'd honed over the years. So when friends and family sat with Ricky and I and tried to commiserate with us, I found myself instead helping them to understand that this mortal life is merely a drop in the bucket. I knew of a certainty I would see and speak with Anne again, though the dynamic may be different. Many times over the months since Anne's passing, there were so many people during the course of offering sympathy who would bring up the subject, what is the reason for life? The reason we come to this earth only to eventually die. I prayed on this question that I might help them find an answer that was uplifting, empowering, and comforting. We are all connected, and what we do affects those around us. However, we are not all one, as many like to say. Though we are one in purpose, and that is to learn, to grow, and to evolve, and to get back to God. Although we are one in purpose and are connected, we are still individuals, making individual decisions for ourselves. This ability to make a decision, to have individual free will, is what makes us evolve and learn. If we did not make a choice to follow a certain path and falter and learn from our mistakes, if we only came to earth to be told what to do like puppets, told it is our fate, then we would not change. We may just as well be mindless objects made to go here and there and do this and that with no meaning. We choose, and we must be allowed to choose, and anyone or anything that tries to force us to do something against our free will is not of the light. When we arrive on the earth, we have a veil of sorts placed over our consciousness so that we don't remember much of who we were before we came here or about the eternalness of our being. However, we chose to come to experience a physical body, and as I've stated earlier, to either learn and evolve or to serve others and evolve, or a little of both. Our Father who art in heaven wants us to choose well so that we might evolve quickly and we might experience great joy and great love, or to choose badly so that we might learn great lessons and find even greater joy, thanks to the contrast. When we experience joy, do you think God experiences great joy? Yes, of course. We can know this through parenthood ourselves, which is our human version of creating a mini universe. When we choose to create a family, we want our children to grow and evolve and not only be the best they can be, but what we truly want, no matter what they choose, is for them to be happy, to have joy in their hearts. And when our children are joyful, does that make us joyful? Yes, it does. There are 4 great things that bring us joy. Here are 3 of them: creation, service, and love. The 4th and most important, I've already spoken about, and we'll talk more about it later, and that being a connection to and a relationship with the one and only true God. But let's go to creation. The creating of anything, be it art or a new scientific breakthrough, a business, music, a book, a dance, a strong body, a piece of furniture, a landscape, or a child, gives us immense pleasure and satisfaction. The universe is ever expanding, contracting, and expanding all over again. It is constantly creating, and creating in turn is what gives us satisfaction and joy. When you have put yourself completely into a thing, given something your all, and actually created something of beauty and worth, how does it make you feel? Joyful. So joyful that you want to share your creation with others, correct? Of course you do. And why would you want to share? Because you want them to feel the joy that you feel. And why do you want them to feel that joy? Because of the love in your heart that God has placed there. Let's go to service. Because of the love in our hearts, for the universe and all its laws are based in love, we sometimes choose to serve others. Being in service to others is another way of evolving, another way of giving love, and another way of creating. For if we help others to find their way, and they begin to create and have joy, do we feel the joy of being part of that? Of course we do. When I'm doing something kind for someone, performing a service for someone, or teaching someone, and I'm able to help them in any way, it seems I am serving others. But I'm also serving myself, for if I can help them to find joy, then I find more joy myself. Therefore, I like to encourage people to be so selfish that they find joy in serving others. At first, they don't understand. Am I actually telling them to be selfish? Yes. Everyone, be so very selfish that you help all of mankind to find joy. How joyful would you be then? Here's a note about helping others. Sometimes we get caught up in self-righteousness in our helping of others, which only destroys what we're trying to create. Here's the explanation for that. I've already addressed that each individual has the ability to choose their path. They choose to come to earth. They may have a preordained path they must search for and discover and claim, or they may simply be here for the experience of learning and choose their path as they go along. And that is why some people feel they are searching for their mission or their calling, and some do not feel that at all. Sometimes, when one person has discovered their calling, they become so caught up in it and in the rightness of it that they begin to think that their calling is for everyone. So they think, my calling is to serve and help others, and it gives me so much joy, and I help so many people, therefore everyone should do this same thing. If everyone wants to have joy, they should do what I do. If people don't choose to help and serve others, they must be selfish or greedy or lazy or stupid or simply unenlightened. You see the flaw in this. Each person has their own path, and we must allow them their path without judgment. Perhaps one's purpose is to be charitable and help others, while another's is to create a great business that employs many people, while another's is to live homeless and teach people compassion. Therefore, do not compel others to follow your path. Compel them to find their own path. And in addition, you do not necessarily follow just one path. Lifetimes can encompass more than one path. Perhaps the great business owner also donates to causes. Perhaps the philanthropist teaches the homeless how to get out of their desperate situation and finds them a job working for the business. Perhaps a person needs to find a way, without help, to get themselves out of their dire situation, and this makes them strong, and they become the great business owner. The universe is not chaos. Nothing is random. So judge no one, love everyone, yet that doesn't mean that you should compromise with evil. Never compromise with that which you know to be evil. That thought needs a bit more explanation. We are not talking about sin, where someone steals something or sleeps with his neighbor's wife. Those acts are mistakes, but they are not evil. Evil is done purposefully, in hatred, to hurt, to infringe on someone's life, or free will. So be kind, be charitable when it feels right to be, and if it doesn't feel right, do not feel guilty. Guilt is a negative concept and can bring much darkness into your life. Let's talk about love. There are many different kinds of love: romantic love, the love between parent and child, the love between siblings, the love between friends, the love of nature, the love of art, of music, of beauty, of reading, of animals, of God and country, and so on. True love is felt and acted upon with wisdom, with kindness, with compassion, and unconditionally. Love is not ownership of an individual. Love offers freedom. Love brings joy. Love is not needy. Love can stand alone. Love is strong. It is the most powerful force in the universe. So live in love and make all decisions based on love. God is love. When Anne left her mortal body and moved on, I didn't think I would ever find that kind of love again. Many of you know that was not the case. Once Anne was gone from our lives, the house would have seemed very large and empty except for the love and service of family and friends. My extended family stayed for a week. My parents stayed for a month. My best friends, Justin and Jason Lee, stayed pretty much indefinitely. They said they felt the need to stay and offer their assistance to us in any way possible. And though I gave them permission to leave many times, I can tell you that their presence was powerful and greatly needed. Justin, a young attorney, was closer to my age and provided me with the companionship I needed, an adult to speak with about everything and anything. Jason, then 17 and a high school senior with much going on in his life, took it upon himself to be a companion to 11-year-old Ricky. And for this, I will be forever grateful. I received a letter during this time, an unwanted letter from Anne's and my nemesis, X. Apparently, he heard of Anne's passing, and clearly, he hadn't matured and moved on as I'd thought. He stated in the letter that he knew I had killed Anne. He believed I had poisoned her. He would never forgive me for taking her away from him, and that one day he would get his revenge. I thought about taking the letter to the police, but decided to simply put it away. I didn't want to deal with it or him. I had more important things to put my attention toward and didn't want to give the letter any of my energy or focus. I filed it away, both physically and mentally. I spent many hours with Ricky, talking, teaching, comforting, allowing him to grieve. Jason gave him a lighter outlet, fun and humor. I suppose comparatively I was a pretty serious guy. Ricky's demeanor had always been fun, jovial, and lighthearted. He was quick to smile and quick to laugh, which was one of the reasons he was such a popular young man. Jason encouraged that part of him. And though I was the one who'd actually experienced the visitation of an angelic messenger, it was Ricky who seemed to show more faith, more resilience with his mother's passing. Sometimes it was Ricky who comforted me. We pretty much clung to each other. We became closer than ever, really inseparable. Over the next several years, Ricky did various movies, and the world began to fall in love with this young, good-looking boy. In between roles, Ricky and I traveled the world as part of his education. We decided to learn several more languages and try them out in the countries where they originated. We already spoke both English and, of course, Hawaiian. We knew much French from my grandfather, Chinese, both Cantonese and Mandarin from my other grandfather, and some Japanese from my mother's side of the family. We decided we would learn them all and add Korean with Justin's help and Spanish. It was quite an undertaking, but as we mastered each one, the next one became easier and easier. Ricky's younger mind was amazing, and I was quite impressed with his ability to learn new things so quickly. Justin and Jason, though they finally stopped living with us after 3 months, they remained our constant and loyal friends over the years. In Anne's absence, I completely dedicated myself to my son and to my martial arts studios. Ricky and I made goals to stay aligned spiritually, to pray together every day and individually at least twice a day. We attended church because fellowship with other believers is important and gives strength and keeps our vibration high. I think that was the reason why we drew so much success into our lives. Ricky's stardom grew, and my popularity as a teacher, not only in the martial arts, but as a life and spiritual mentor, also grew. I won the Mart twice more, and I was inducted into the Black Belt Hall of Fame when I was 33. Many of my students had become highly successful martial artists and instructors themselves. Both Ricky and Jason Lee had gone the tournament circuit and had been both national and world champions. They were pretty impressive, and I, as their teacher, was proud of them. They worked hard, trained hard, and accomplished close to perfection. My schools grew so numerous that I actually only instructed the masters of each school, and even this was becoming only a part-time endeavor. My schools were well run, and my job had become an overseer, an honored visitor to a studio, or a dignitary at a giant black belt testing celebration. Ricky was more sought after than ever in film. Jason became sought after as a consultant by local law enforcement at first, and soon after that by the federal government and by our military. I couldn't have been more pleased. He was finding his way, his path, and that path would eventually take him to great heights. His brother Justin was becoming a powerful attorney and was stretching his law firm wings into other states. I was blessed to be able to see the fruit of the work I'd put in, the changing of lives, the accomplishments and creations of others, all of them living in love and light and doing what they could to protect the innocent and to fight the darkness. My gratitude for all of this knows no bounds. I continued my daily prayers and meditations, continued working on my spiritual connection. Ricky and I traveled to Kauai often, hiked back into the sacred places, and spoke to God in Jesus' name. Ricky was my constant companion, and I his. We believed in always creating, always progressing, so we honed our craft, reaching for perfection. We incorporated numerous martial art weapons into our training. Ricky was a natural with several, though mostly with nunchucks, bow staff, and the knife. The knife was my particular specialty, and the scimitar, kama, and sword. It was merely a skill we worked on perfecting. I had no intentions of ever using one of these weapons on a human being. I had no idea that any of this training would ever come in useful other than to astonish people at martial arts demonstrations. That I was still young and learning, and I had a lot to learn. And that is the end of chapter 8.